Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I just got off of work here. I got my night job. I just got off of that, and I thought I'd give you a video because I haven't given you a video in a couple of days. So I'm still stuck on this Fed policy, Fed monetary policy that came out the other day in the press conference, and really it stemmed from this Wall Street Journal article that was titled "Fed Officials Weigh Earlier Than Expected End to the Bond Portfolio Runoff." So if you're not sure of what that means, the Federal Reserve had purchased a ton of these treasuries, right? And they had these bonds on their asset sheets. And what they have been doing is when they bought those bonds, they issued liabilities out there. Those liabilities are the folding dollars. So those dollars went into circulation and the bonds came into their possession. As those bonds come due and they get paid off, the maturity gets paid on them, the Federal Reserve receives those liabilities back, those folding dollars, and they essentially destroy them. Or they could roll them over into new bonds. But lately, they've been taking them off the market, right? Which is basically is shrinking the liquidity of the amount of dollars that are out there in circulation. And people have been having a problem with it. That's the reason why interest rates are going up and stuff like that. Now, the Fed said in that press conference that they are going into an abundant reserve system, or that they'll be using abundant reserve system. And so I pulled the Seeking Alpha article, and it says the difference between abundant and limited reserves is that in the former, the interest rate is no longer chiefly determined by the supply of reserves as it is in the limited reserve system. Rather, it is determined by the interest on excess reserves set by the Fed. The interest on excess reserves, together with the overnight reverse repo program, set the minimum level for the effective fund rate, thus providing guidance for the effective fund rate to stay close to the Fed's policy target. This divorce between the supply of reserves and the interest rate target allows the Fed to keep a sizable balance sheet while they are raising the rate. So if you're not quite sure of what's going on there, the effective fund rate is the rate in which banks loan their excess reserves to the banks that need reserves in an overnight basis, okay? So at the end of the day, some banks are going to need reserves and some banks are going to have excess reserves. That they loan the excess to the ones who need it. That loan is, the interest on that is called the effective fund rate. The fund rate is the target that they're trying to shoot for. Now, the Fed can basically determine how much reserves are going to be on the banks, and this amount of reserves is going to be the scarcity in which that these interest rates are going to come in, right? So like some banks are going to have it and some banks aren't. In an abundant reserve system, those reserves are so inflated or so abundant that they don't need to loan or borrow money from the other banks, okay? Instead, what happens is that these banks have these excess reserves, and what do they do with it? Well, they're going to use the overnight reverse repo program, okay? What is the overnight reverse repo program? This right here from the Federal Reserve, where is it? Which one? Oh, right here. Describes it like this. Now, first, in a repo transaction, the desk purchases treasuries, agency debt, or agency mortgage-backed securities from a counterparty subject to an agreement to resell the security at a later date. Okay, but the important part there is that in a repo transaction, the desk purchases treasuries, okay? In a reverse repo transaction, the opposite occurs. The desk sells securities to a counterparty subject to an agreement to repurchase the securities later. Okay, but the important part about that one is in a reverse repo transaction, the opposite occurs. The desk sells securities, okay? So now that we got that part, if we look over here, and this is also coming from the Federal Reserve, it says in these transactions, the transactions shifts some of the liabilities of on the Federal Reserve's balance sheets from the deposits held by the depository institution, also known as banks, to the reserve repos while the trade is outstanding. Okay, so if you don't quite get that, what they are doing is they are taking their liabilities, right? They're taking their assets and getting their liabilities back for them in an overnight process, okay? So when they do that, they can establish an interest rate, okay? Because the bank is going to make a profit from this, okay? The Fed will establish how much profit they make. That will be the interest, okay, that they make on this overnight transaction, okay, that interest will now be the effective fund rate. Okay, it won't be based on banks competing to try and get a loan, get the best loan. It'll be more like banks trying to find the best place to put their money. And since the Federal Reserve will basically be the floor, right? And this is another name for it, the floor system, that these institutions will most likely not find another place that they would want to park that excess reserves, considering that the Fed is going to be like the lowest that it'll possibly be. So whatever interest that is, that would be the effective fund rate from that point on. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that. I tell you, my mind kind of spins on the cause and effects from some of this stuff. Now, I kind of see this as an availability for the Fed to have a way to get their liabilities back. And now they really, really want those liabilities, okay? Because what's going to end up happening is that if the interest rates rise, okay, if the interest rates go up, the existing bonds that are out there that have been purchased and that are sitting on portfolios, those are going to start to diminish in value, the amount that you can sell those bonds on the open market. And the reason is because their interest rate will be less than the new interest rates that are coming out that are paying higher. Okay, so when bond prices or when bond interest rates go up, the existing bonds, the amount that you can sell them for, starts to diminish. And so the Fed is sitting on a ton of these things, and the last thing they want to see is these bonds diminishing in value, failing for them to be able to get their liabilities back. So I have a feeling this is a way that they can get their liabilities back without necessarily having to sell their assets onto the market, which is those bonds. All right. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I hope I got it all right. I'm going to leave a bunch of links in the description for you. I don't know what the cause and effect is from this. I can have, like, my mind kind of spins on it. You guys come up with a bunch of cause and effects from this. Put it down into the comments. I would love to see what you guys' thoughts are on some of this. And then also let me know if I got something wrong here. Maybe I'm missing something here, but yeah, this seems to me that this is a way that the Fed can take control of the interest rates and get rid of those, or at least get their liabilities back. I don't know how much they're going to be able to unload their assets since they're kind of doing this repurchasing thing again, but it definitely seems like a way that they can at least get their hands on their liabilities again. So anyway, you guys let me know. Uneducated Economist. Talk to you guys later.